Have you ever wondered if your spiritual awakening is real, or if you're just experiencing an inflated ego, disguised as enlightenment? This question haunts many people on the spiritual path. And for good reason. The line between authentic spiritual calling and narcissistic delusion can sometimes appear dangerously thin. If you've been questioning whether you're truly a chosen one, or if you're falling into the trap of spiritual narcissism, what I'm about to share with you will provide the clarity you've been seeking. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone who claims to be spiritually awakened actually is. And the consequences of confusing ego inflation with spiritual calling can be devastating, not just for you, but for everyone around you. This isn't about judgment or spiritual gatekeeping. This is about honest self-reflection and authentic spiritual growth. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of the fundamental differences between genuine spiritual calling and narcissistic spiritual bypassing. You'll learn to recognize the subtle signs that distinguish true chosen ones from those who are using spirituality to feed their ego. And most importantly, you'll know how to ensure you're walking the authentic path. I know this topic might feel uncomfortable. Nobody wants to discover they've been deceiving themselves about their spiritual nature. But if this resonates with you, if you're brave enough to examine your motivations honestly, then you're already demonstrating one of the key qualities that separates genuine spiritual seekers from spiritual narcissists: the willingness to question yourself. The truth is, every authentic spiritual seeker goes through periods of doubt, moments where they wonder if their experiences are real, or if they're just fooling themselves. This self-questioning is actually a healthy sign. It shows that your ego hasn't completely hijacked your spiritual journey. Real chosen ones are humble enough to examine their motivations, while spiritual narcissists are so convinced of their specialness that they never question themselves. Let me share something deeply personal that happened to me about 5 years ago. Something that forced me to confront the uncomfortable possibility that my spiritual awakening might have been nothing more than an elaborate ego trip. I had been on what I considered a profound spiritual journey for about 3 years. I was experiencing what I believed were powerful spiritual downloads, receiving what I thought were messages from my spirit guides, and feeling increasingly certain that I had been chosen for some important spiritual mission. I started a small spiritual community, began offering guidance to others, and felt like I was finally living my purpose. But then something happened that shattered my spiritual self-image completely. A close friend, someone I trusted and respected, pulled me aside after one of my spiritual talks and said something that stopped me cold. "I'm concerned about you. You used to be so humble and curious, but lately, you seem to think you have all the answers. You talk about your spiritual gifts like they make you better than other people. And you dismiss anyone who questions your insights as not spiritually evolved enough to understand." At first, I was furious. How dare she question my spiritual experiences? Didn't she understand that I was trying to help people? Couldn't she see that I was sharing profound spiritual truths? But then, in a moment of painful clarity, I realized she was right. I had been using my spiritual experiences to feel superior to others. I had been dismissing criticism as spiritual ignorance. I had been so focused on being special that I had lost sight of what authentic spirituality actually looks like. That night, I went through what I can only describe as a spiritual ego death. I had to face the possibility that everything I thought I knew about my spiritual calling might have been nothing more than narcissistic fantasy. I had to examine every experience, every insight, every moment of feeling chosen, ask myself the hardest question of all: was this real? Or was this just my ego desperately trying to feel important? What I discovered during that process of brutal self-examination changed everything. I learned that the line between authentic spiritual calling and spiritual narcissism isn't always clear. But there are definitive ways to tell the difference. And if you're willing to look honestly at your own spiritual journey, these distinctions can save you from years of self-deception and help you find your way to authentic spiritual growth. Now let me share with you the fundamental differences between genuine chosen ones and spiritual narcissists. Because understanding these distinctions is crucial for anyone serious about authentic spiritual development. The first and most important difference is in how they relate to their spiritual experiences. A genuine chosen one approaches their spiritual gifts with humility and responsibility. They understand that any abilities or insights they receive are not about them. They're meant to be used in service of others. They see themselves as vessels or channels, not as the source of their spiritual power. A spiritual narcissist, on the other hand, uses their spiritual experiences to feel superior to others. They collect spiritual experiences like trophies, constantly talking about their latest download, their most recent vision, or their newest spiritual ability. They see their gifts as evidence of their specialness, rather than as tools for service. Here's a simple test. When you have a spiritual experience or insight, what's your first impulse? Is it to understand how this can help others, or is it to share it in a way that makes you look spiritually advanced? Genuine chosen ones feel the weight of responsibility that comes with spiritual gifts. Spiritual narcissists feel the thrill of being special. I remember working with Sarah, a member of our community, who was struggling with this exact distinction. She had been having powerful dreams and visions for months, and she couldn't tell if they were genuine spiritual experiences or just her imagination running wild. What helped her discern the difference was examining her motivation for sharing these experiences. When she talked about her visions, was she hoping people would be impressed by her spiritual abilities, or was she genuinely trying to help them understand something important? When she received what she believed were spiritual insights, did she feel proud of her specialness? Or did she feel humbled by the responsibility of carrying this information? Stay with me, because what comes next will reveal the second crucial difference that most people completely miss. The second major difference lies in how they handle criticism and feedback. Genuine chosen ones welcome honest feedback about their spiritual journey because they understand that spiritual growth requires constant self-examination and course correction. They're more interested in truth than in being right, more committed to growth than to maintaining their spiritual image. Spiritual narcissists, however, react defensively to any questioning of their spiritual experiences or insights. They dismiss critics as not spiritually evolved enough to understand, or they claim that negative feedback is just low vibrational energy that they need to protect themselves from. They surround themselves with people who validate their spiritual specialness and avoid anyone who might challenge their self-perception. This difference is crucial because authentic spiritual development requires what spiritual teachers call spiritual discernment, the ability to honestly evaluate your own experiences and motivations. If you can't tolerate having your spiritual experiences questioned, if you react with anger or defensiveness when someone suggests you might be mistaken about something, that's a red flag that your ego might be driving your spiritual journey. But here's what most people don't realize. Even genuine chosen ones can fall into spiritual narcissism if they're not careful. The spiritual path is full of ego traps, moments where the ego tries to co-opt your spiritual experiences for its own purposes. The difference is that authentic spiritual seekers recognize these traps and correct course, while spiritual narcissists get lost in them now. Here's where it gets interesting. The third difference is in how they relate to other people, especially those who don't share their spiritual beliefs or experiences. Genuine chosen ones feel deep compassion for all beings, regardless of their level of spiritual awareness. They understand that everyone is on their own unique spiritual journey, and they don't judge others for being at a different stage of development. They're able to connect with people from all walks of life, because they recognize the divine spark in everyone. Spiritual narcissists, however, tend to divide the world into two categories. The spiritually awakened, like themselves, and the spiritually asleep, everyone else. They feel superior to people who don't share their spiritual interests, and they often struggle to maintain relationships with family members or old friends who aren't on a similar spiritual path. They use spiritual concepts to justify their sense of superiority and their disconnection from ordinary people. This is a particularly insidious trap because it can feel spiritually justified. It's easy to convince yourself that you're just naturally drawn to higher vibrational people, or that you need to protect your energy from those who don't understand. But authentic spirituality increases your capacity for love and connection with all beings, not just those who share your beliefs. If you're still watching, you're definitely someone who cares about walking an authentic spiritual path. And I want you to pay close attention to this next distinction, because it's perhaps the most important one. The fourth difference is in their relationship with suffering and challenges. Genuine chosen ones understand that spiritual growth often comes through difficulty, that challenges are opportunities for development, and that suffering can be a teacher if approached with the right attitude. They don't try to bypass difficult emotions or experiences with spiritual concepts. They meet them head on with courage and humility. Spiritual narcissists, however, often use spirituality as a way to avoid dealing with their psychological and emotional issues. They engage in what psychologists call spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. They might claim that negative emotions are just illusions, or that they've transcended human problems, when in reality, they're just avoiding the hard work of genuine healing and growth. This bypassing can look very sophisticated and spiritually advanced on the surface, but it actually prevents real spiritual development. You can't transcend what you haven't first integrated. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. Authentic spiritual growth requires facing your shadow, working through your trauma, and dealing with your psychological patterns, not just floating above them with spiritual concepts. I spent 2 years in what I now recognize as spiritual bypassing after my initial awakening experiences. Instead of dealing with my childhood trauma, my relationship patterns, and my deep-seated insecurities, I convinced myself that I had transcended these human concerns through my spiritual insights. I used meditation and spiritual practices to avoid feeling difficult emotions, rather than to process them in a healthy way. It wasn't until I started working with a therapist who understood both psychology and spirituality that I realized how much I had been avoiding. Real spiritual growth, I learned, requires integrating your human experience, not transcending it. It means becoming more fully human, not less human. Now here's where it gets even more profound. The fifth difference lies in their understanding of their spiritual mission and purpose. Genuine chosen ones feel called to serve others, but they approach this calling with humility and patience. They understand that their mission might unfold slowly, that they need to develop themselves before they can effectively help others, and that their role might be much simpler and more ordinary than their ego would prefer. They're willing to do the unglamorous work of personal development and service without needing recognition or validation. Spiritual narcissists, however, are often obsessed with having a grand, important spiritual mission that makes them feel special and significant. They want to be spiritual teachers, healers, or leaders before they've done the inner work necessary to serve others effectively. They're more interested in the status and recognition that comes with spiritual leadership than in the actual work of helping people. This difference shows up in how they talk about their purpose. Genuine chosen ones might say things like, "I feel called to help others, but I'm still learning how to do that effectively." Or, "I sense I have gifts to share, but I want to make sure I'm coming from the right place before I step into that role." Spiritual narcissists are more likely to make grandiose claims about their mission to raise the consciousness of humanity, or their role as a light worker here to save the world. But here's what most people don't realize about authentic spiritual calling. It often looks much more ordinary than the ego expects. Your mission might be to raise conscious children, to bring healing presence to your workplace, to be a source of stability and wisdom for your family and friends. The scale of your impact doesn't determine the importance of your mission. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share will help you understand the 6 crucial differences that can save you from years of spiritual self-deception. The 6th difference is in how they handle spiritual power and influence. When genuine chosen ones develop spiritual abilities or gain followers, they become more careful and responsible, not more confident and self-assured. They understand that spiritual power can easily corrupt, and they actively work to stay humble and grounded. Spiritual narcissists, however, see spiritual power and influence as validation of their specialness. The more abilities they develop or followers they gain, the more convinced they become of their own spiritual superiority. They start to believe their own hype and lose touch with their humanity. This is why many spiritual teachers and leaders eventually fall from grace. They allow their spiritual gifts and the admiration of others to feed their ego rather than deepen their humility. Authentic spiritual power always comes with increased responsibility and humility, never with increased arrogance or self-importance. The 7th difference is perhaps the most subtle, but also the most telling: their relationship with doubt and uncertainty. Genuine chosen ones maintain what Zen Buddhism calls beginner's mind, a sense of openness, curiosity, and willingness to be wrong. They understand that spiritual growth is an ongoing process, that they don't have all the answers, and that doubt can be a healthy part of the spiritual journey. Spiritual narcissists, however, are threatened by doubt because it challenges their sense of spiritual superiority. They need to feel certain about their spiritual insights and experiences because uncertainty would undermine their special status. They often speak with absolute conviction about spiritual matters that are inherently mysterious and unknowable. Here's a simple test. How do you react when someone challenges your spiritual beliefs or experiences? Do you get curious and open to the possibility that you might be wrong? Or do you get defensive and need to prove that you're right? Genuine spiritual maturity includes the ability to hold your beliefs lightly, to remain open to new information, and to admit when you don't know something. Now, here's where it gets really important. The 8th difference is in their impact on others. Genuine chosen ones have a healing, uplifting effect on the people around them. They make others feel seen, understood, and empowered. They inspire others to connect with their own spiritual nature rather than to depend on them for spiritual guidance. Spiritual narcissists, however, often leave people feeling drained, confused, or inadequate. They might initially inspire others with their charisma and spiritual insights, but over time, people start to feel like they can never measure up to the narcissist's level of spiritual development. Instead of empowering others, they create dependency and hierarchy. Pay attention to how people respond to you when you share your spiritual insights or experiences. Do they feel inspired to explore their own spirituality? Or do they feel like they need you to interpret spiritual reality for them? Do they leave your conversations feeling empowered? Or do they feel like they're not spiritual enough? Fellow chosen ones, I want you to understand something crucial. The fact that you're watching this video, that you're willing to question your own motivations and examine your spiritual journey honestly, is actually strong evidence that you're on an authentic path. Spiritual narcissists rarely engage in this kind of self-reflection because they're too invested in maintaining their special status. But here's what I want you to remember. We all have narcissistic tendencies. We all have moments where our ego tries to co-opt our spiritual experiences for its own purposes. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to stay aware, to keep questioning yourself, and to course correct when you notice you're getting off track. The spiritual path is full of ego traps, and even the most sincere seekers can fall into them. What matters is your willingness to recognize when you've fallen into a trap and your commitment to finding your way back to authentic spiritual growth. So how do you ensure that you're walking the path of a genuine chosen one rather than falling into spiritual narcissism? Here are the key practices that can keep you on track. First, maintain regular self-examination. Set aside time regularly to honestly assess your motivations, your reactions to feedback, and your impact on others. Ask yourself hard questions. Am I using my spiritual experiences to feel superior to others? Am I open to being wrong about my spiritual insights? Am I serving others, or am I serving my ego? Second, seek out honest feedback from people you trust. Surround yourself with friends and mentors who care enough about you to tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. If everyone around you just validates your spiritual specialness, you're probably not getting the feedback you need to grow. Third, stay connected to your humanity. Don't try to transcend your human experience, integrate it. Work with therapists, do shadow work, deal with your psychological patterns. The most spiritually mature people I know are also the most psychologically healthy. Fourth, focus on service rather than recognition. Ask yourself regularly, how can I use my gifts to help others? How can I serve without needing credit or validation? True spiritual power is always used in service of others, never for personal aggrandizement. Fifth, maintain beginner's mind. Stay curious, stay open, stay willing to be wrong. The moment you think you have spirituality figured out is the moment you stop growing. Embrace uncertainty as a natural part of the spiritual journey. And finally, remember that authentic spirituality makes you more loving, not more special. If your spiritual journey is making you feel superior to others, rather than more connected to them, it's time to examine whether you're on the right path. The world needs authentic chosen ones now more than ever. We need people who are genuinely committed to service, who approach their spiritual gifts with humility, who can hold space for others without needing to be the center of attention. We need spiritual leaders who are more interested in empowering others than in being admired. But we don't need more spiritual narcissists. We don't need people who use spirituality to feed their ego, who create hierarchy and dependency, who divide the world into the awakened and the unawakened. This kind of spiritual elitism is actually harmful to the collective awakening process. Your willingness to examine your own motivations honestly, to question your spiritual experiences, to seek feedback and stay humble. These qualities suggest that you have the potential to be an authentic spiritual guide and healer. But remember, this is an ongoing process, not a destination. You don't graduate from the need for self-examination and humility. The spiritual path is a lifelong journey of growth, service, and increasing love for all beings. Stay committed to that journey, stay honest with yourself, and trust that your authentic spiritual gifts will unfold in perfect timing when they're meant to serve the highest good. You have more power than you realize, but that power is meant to be used in service of love, not in service of ego. You're exactly where you need to be on your spiritual journey, even if that includes moments of doubt and self-questioning. And your mission, whatever form it takes, is important, but only if it comes from a place of authentic spiritual maturity rather than ego inflation. Remember, fellow chosen ones, true spiritual power is always humble, always loving, and always in service of the greater good. Keep questioning yourself, keep growing, and keep serving with an open heart. The world needs your authentic gifts, not your spiritual ego. Welcome to the path of genuine spiritual service. The journey requires everything of you, but it offers everything in return. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because you won't want to miss what's coming next. This isn't just a video. It's a calling for the chosen ones like you.